A.J. Brown, trade chatter, maybe starts to pick up this week. Jeremy and Joe, good morning. Talking Olympic hockey with Slovakia up 1-0 on Germany in the second period. The U.S. will play later today. The Canadians play later today. The whole men's side of it plays later today because it's the knockout round. Canada and Czechia at 10:40 this morning. U.S. playing at 3:10 against Sweden. Rasmus Dahlin in Sweden against Tage Thompson and the U.S. So big game later today. Meanwhile, we're talking Bills with you, and joining us on the Western Hotline is Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills podcast, who joins us on Wednesdays throughout the season and into the offseason as well. Joe, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Jeremy. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well. I was just putting together a tweet, Joe, to talk about, because we're going to talk about wide receiver trade ideas, and I am also sometimes a little sensitive to people who think, like, what about the rest of the stuff? And the tweet I was going to put together was an idea about the Bills offseason, which is this. I think the reason that maybe we're hammering down on receivers so much is because the offensive changes we expect are specific, and the defensive changes we expect are volume-based, if I may. Like, that doesn't mean just whatever it takes, and they'll have specific needs over there, but I expect this offense to add a receiver. And then on defense, I expect the draft to kind of look like it did last year, where it might be the first, the second, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. Like, Jim Leonard's going to need volume over there, and Brandon Beane's going to throw a lot at that side of the ball. But the receiver's easier to kind of maybe pin down as one need for this offense. This, of course, with the interior of the offensive line, we know that's there. But it's like one targeted need and then a volume-based approach on the defense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of lumped in the interior offensive line with center and left guard, because obviously that'll dictate a lot of the offense. But, I mean, yeah, it's pretty much what you outlined there. It's adding a meaningful option at receiver, making sure that you have a good plan for the interior offensive line. And then, yes, I would expect a lot to be invested on defense, which is interesting as I, engage with a lot of the commentary around the content that I produce. There's a lot of people that are just like defense. It's like, yes, I'm with you, but we still have other things to discuss, and that includes giving Josh Allen a little bit more help at that wide receiver position.
Yeah. When looking at this class, you kind of promised me you might take a look at some of the guys at the top, whether it's Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson. Like, there's guys that are going to be off the board that we can kind of eliminate from the Bills taking 26th overall, and then it's the trade route, the trade up, or trade for A.J. Brown, or trade for, insert name here, whatever, free agency as well. Have you had a chance to look at the top of the class yet?
Not in the draft, Jeremy, but that I will get to that. But I think that's really kind of an interesting angle, though, is like, what is the right path to improve the wide receiver position? Is it, kind of playing out the draft and maybe making a move up, or sitting and seeing who's there at 26, or do you take advantage of the depth? Do you go the free agent signing route? Obviously, that's contingent on who actually makes it to free agency. And then there's the trade piece. And look, receivers get traded. That's what happens in the NFL. They get traded more than any other position. And I think there's a deep list of players. Obviously the challenge with a trade is that, you got to give up draft capital and, commit cap space to the player. But you got to figure out what the right path is. This feels like a big need. Do you want to leave that to a rookie to kind of see where it goes? Do you want to go heavy on a trade? Like, obviously there's a lot of different pathways to do it, and I think identifying the right one is probably step one.
News today that Mike Evans plans to play and might also test free agency. Where does he land on your list of ideas?
Well, I think if you foil it against, like, okay, would you rather trade for A.J. Brown or sign Mike Evans? You might rather just sign Mike Evans, right? I think that's kind of how you have to look at it. I think the exciting part of Mike Evans is that he would 100% address the need for an X receiver. And that is a staple of a Sean Payton offense. They always have that guy, whether it's Michael Thomas or it's Marcus Colston or currently Cortland Sutton. Like, that player matters for what they want to get done. And, Keon Coleman's supposed to be that player. I'm not convinced he will be, but Mike Evans would immediately give you that piece. Now, Evans has been a good route runner and separator in his career. I do worry a little bit about his age and coming off of the injury, and that Josh Allen is not necessarily a throw guys open type quarterback, right? So it would be interesting to see how that comes together. But for that true X role, and maybe getting a lot of impact for a modest deal, that could be a really good pathway to go down. I think you'd want to, add a little bit more as well, whether that's, a day 2 pick or another veteran along the way. But I think Mike Evans would be a heck of a place to start this conversation.
The Allen is not a throw guys open quarterback. When you lay that out, what do you mean by that? And what should the Bills do about that, deal with that? Is that something that you feel like you don't even have to change because obviously he's one of the best in the NFL if he's not the best player? Like, what does that mean, and what does that mean for the skill set that he should be playing with?
Well, what I mean by that is Josh Allen tends to be a little bit more of a visual player where he wants targets to be established as open, and then he'll rip the football. And he's got the type of arm strength to get away with that, right? So you think about some quarterbacks, they don't have, super dynamic throwing power, and it requires them to be very anticipatory and, reading coverage and understanding how the routes respond to the coverage and where the space is going to be and anticipate and throw that football. And I would say to an extent, there's the element of, hey, you're covered, but I'm still going to throw it to you and give you a chance. Some quarterbacks have a big appetite for that. And I don't think that piece or the anticipatory piece is really where Josh Allen excels. Josh Allen, when he's able to kind of have a feel for guys that can declare themselves as open and then tap into his arm talent, he's able to be really, really productive. And so, because I think he has the physical upside that he does, the physical skill that he has, it hasn't required him to be as anticipatory. And I think you often see this relationship between arm talent and anticipatory throwers. Tua Tagovailoa is a great anticipatory thrower. He has to be, right? Remember Peyton Manning those last few years with the Denver Broncos? That dude was throwing the ball, steps before guys were even getting into breaks because he had to. Josh hasn't had to do that. And so, I think because of that, it puts you in a position where the types of receivers that are best for Josh Allen are the guys that can create that space for themselves. Think about who he's been successful throwing the ball to. Diggs, Beasley, Brown, Sanders. Those are guys that get open. They moved away from Calvin Benjamin and Andre Jones when they were the initial receiver core. You think about Gabe Davis, he's had his flashy moments, but he struggled when he was in a volume-type role. So I think you want guys that'll get open. I think that's an important part of what you're trying to find around Josh Allen.
So in the trade market, would you consider A.J. Brown as an idea to fit into what you just laid out?
Well, I think A.J. Brown is a player that I get nervous about how he will age, and I don't know that that's this year or next, but I think that's a skill set that, you invoke names like Des Bryant or Alshon Jeffrey, and you're like, well, yeah, that's probably not a mid-30s type skill set, but he turns 29 in June. I think there's a couple of years of him, still being kind of the player he's been for the last few years. But A.J. Brown is a player that I think you want to have an element of trust that he will, create leverage and catch the football. I don't think he's a clunky route runner. I don't think he's a dynamic separator. He's probably somewhere in between, but in terms of being a true X receiver and, being able to win those quick, in-breaking routes and, work back down stem and create leverage. And of course he's unbelievable after the catch, and he will, he's also a receiver that wins vertically with body positioning. And I think that has at times not been a good formula for Josh Allen, but you've also seen Gabe Davis as a guy that was a body position player down the field. I think it can work with A.J. Brown, and obviously it's not a huge contract to take on. I think the biggest question I have about A.J. Brown is, Philadelphia. Are they going to take a $43 million dead cap hit to move on? It's dicey there with kind of how the temperature is of that offense especially, but that's a tough pill for Philly to swallow, although I think a lot of people are expecting that there's a good chance A.J. Brown gets moved.
Joe Marino, the Locked On Bills podcast. One of the guys we might add to the mix is Michael Pittman of the Colts, which there's some reports that they could just decide to save on the cap and let him loose, which I think would be kind of nuts, but it could happen. Or maybe they're fielding trade offers and a team would trade for his rights and then extend him, restructure him. Any thoughts on the Colts? I want to call him the number one. I know Alec Pierce is all the rage, but Pittman's been their number one for a while.
Yeah, I mean, Pierce is a good player, but he's never even had a 50-catch season, right? Pittman's been the more volume piece of this offense. And I think for the Colts, they got a lot to figure out, and they're going to have a very expensive group of skill players. They're already paying John Taylor. Josh Downs is due. Maybe they do want to go with Pierce as the younger player. And Tyler Warren, of course, is a good young player. And they got some offensive line stuff to figure out. And so they might look at a receiver, Michael Pittman, who turns 29 in October, that played through a low back fracture in 2024 that they didn't get surgery on, and he played through it in 2025. There's been some concussions, and maybe they're thinking to themselves like, yeah, do we get ahead of moving on? We get $20 million in cap space if we do. And if you trade him, of course, you still get the same $20 million in cap space, but then assets on top of it. Maybe this is a path that makes sense for the Colts. Once you kind of dig into it a little bit and realize what they kind of have brewing at the skill players, they still got to figure out the quarterback piece. So I think they might be leveraging that as a get out of it early, get assets now, and see where it can take you.
What about in free agency, Joe? That's what the Bills have really done, right? A couple years in a row, they've dipped into that with Palmer and Samuel and others. That middle of the road, middle of tier receiver contract in free agency, which I know is not my favorite idea at all, but who are the names on that? Alec Pierce, Shaheed again. We talked about him at the deadline. Romeo Dobbs. Is there any name you've seen on that list that whets your appetite?
Well, that's my project today, is studying free agent receivers. The podcast I did this morning covered the trade targets, so I've thought a little bit about this. But, I think there's maybe a cautionary tale about this type of receiver, right? Of course, in Buffalo with Palmer and Samuel, and I think about guys like Diami Brown signed for the 1 year, $10 million deal. It's like, is this where you want to go? I think that's just the opportunity cost there gets me concerned. I think you might want to supplement a bigger move with a mid-tier free agent, but I think you should be more interested in making a bigger investment, and we'll see. Like Mike Evans, maybe that does qualify, and I don't know that you're going to have to pay him like $1 zillion, right? Like that, if that would be the type of free agent, or Alec Pierce, if you do want that specialized verticality. Rashid Shaheed would check a lot of boxes for this team, but I think you probably stay away from that like middle tier type player and try to get yourself a little bit more of a player that has a chance to give your offense some volume and consistency.
Joe Marino, Locked On Bills podcast on the Wester Hotline. Joe, how about some other names here, like, I don't know, guys could be moved just because they're in crowded rooms, like a DJ Moore or a Quentin Johnston.
Brian Thomas.
Sure.
Although that might have taken a hit with the Hunter news this week. So there are a couple names like that.
Well, even with the Hunter news with Brian Thomas, I mean, he was there after they traded for Jacoby Myers. The last 8 games, Brian Thomas was 4th on the team in targets, right? Myers had 55, Parker Washington 43, Brenton Strange 35, and Brian Thomas 29. Like, and this is they're probably concerned maybe about, like, if they don't move on, is this a situation where there's just diminishing returns on the potential, right? Like, if he's going to be the 4th option, that there's just not going to be enough volume there to get more in a trade, or want to extend him. And obviously that's not the general manager in place. James Glanso didn't draft Brian Thomas Jr. And I think anytime you have a new general manager in place, they just tend to move on from players that they didn't bring in. And so I think that Brian Thomas Jr. conversation is a good one to have. He's young. So he turns 24 in October. He would certainly give the down the field presence that this offense needs, and I think he's got a lot of room to develop his overall game. So if Brian Thomas is truly available, I think it's a decent opportunity to kind of swoop in and see what you can do. Now, DJ Moore is an interesting one. Now, obviously, the contract there is a little bit more difficult. You're taking on a $24.5 million 2026 cap hit, so you're probably going to want to extend him. Do you want to? Right, as a guy that turns 29 in April. But maybe that's where the value is. You can trade for DJ Moore for maybe a day 3 pick, knowing that you have to take on a lot more salary and make it like a 2-year type situation. I covered 10 receivers in today's podcast. There's a lot of options out there, and like we've already established, receivers get traded. The Bills have a need. I mean, this is definitely a real possibility for Buffalo this offseason.
Yeah, it'd be about implementing somebody in this offense as well, and seeing how much Joe Brady wants to change it, whether or not they're open to personalities again, timelines. There's a ton of things to figure out with this position. That's why, like I mentioned at the start, Joe, like this is a targeted move we know they have to make, and then the rest of it is volume for building out this Bills defense. And when it comes to the hired gun kind of signing, like let's real quickly on the defensive side of things, like Boye Mafe is big free agent maybe they could get out there, someone like that. We're waiting on Max Crosby news. Do you feel like the overall free agent class of, I don't say like bit players, role players, do you think there will be good volume for this Bills defense to add? Names out there to attack once we open up the signing period?
Yes. And I think what really intrigues me about that is with the transition to Jim Leonard's defense, there are way more roles and opportunities for different types of skill sets, right? I think there was like very much like archetypes with Sean McDermott at positions, and you just kind of knew guys that would and would not really factor in. There's a lot more room for different types of players to sign and have roles. And so that intrigues me. Like the 240, 250-pound, bursty, bendy pass rusher, that is on the menu now. The downhill linebackers on the menu. Versatile slot players that can, play man in the slot, playing deep alignments, those positionless type defensive backs. There is a spot now for those types of players in this defense. There's a space for 330-pound nose tackles, right? So there's so many different opportunities now, and it opens up the menu of different paths you can go down. And I think there's, maybe missing some star power in this free agency class, and it'll guys are going to get extended. It's not going to look the same in 3 weeks as it does right now. But I think the Bills will have a good chance to fill some of those roles with modest vets and get return on that because of the style and structure of this new defense.
Anyone want to have a conversation about trying to steal Brandon Aubrey from the Cowboys?
Brandon Aubrey?
Yeah. You see that?
No.
The Cowboys could place if they don't come to terms on a deal, they do the RFA tender on him, which is
you want to offer sheet?
I'm just saying, I'm reading a piece at CBS Sports how he's going to be an RFA, and if they don't reach a long-term deal before free agency starts March 11th, then they could go to a spot where they place a first-round tender, a second-round tender. You put a salary on him, and if somebody decides to pay it, you get a first in return.
Counterpoint on that, Jeremy, do you get nervous if the Bills have a kicker like Brandon Aubrey that can make from 65
good question.
yards? I think he wants them go for it. It's fun for end-of-half stuff, right? Like, if you can leverage end-of-half and, kick some long ones, but I don't know, if it's 4th and 2 from the 48, I'd take my chances going for it. Right? You got to.
Yeah, not to make fun of this positional idea, but Tyler Bass's future, they could save money on the cap, right? If they decide to move on, and if they do that, I don't think Matt Prater is a long-term plan. Joe, do I need to be looking at kickers in the draft?
Here's my plan for kicker. All right, so the Bills have Tyler Bass. They also have this Maddox Trujillo to a futures deal. He made from 65 or 64 at Lincoln Financial, kicking for Temple, whatever team he was on. So he's part of the mix, and he's, of course, the Tyler Bass, and Bean has come out and kind of said that their plan is for Tyler Bass to be the kicker in 2026.
Okay.
The Bills can release Tyler Bass with a post-June 1st designation. They would save right at $4 million in cap space, and then they take a $1 million dead cap hit this year and next, which to me is nothing. And what that does is I think you have the opportunity to look at Tyler Bass throughout this OTA period, and then if he's not going to be good to go, then you move on. You get your $4 million, and here's the ace in the hole. It's Matt Prater. To me, it's Matt Prater. He's obviously old at 42 years old, but Jeff Rodgers, the Bills' special teams coordinator, coached Prater for the last 6 years in Arizona before he came to Buffalo, 18 to 24. He was the special teams coordinator in Arizona with Prater, and he was Prater's special teams coordinator's rookie year in Denver. There's a deep history there. So, maybe it's hey, we'll see this through with Tyler Bass. If it's not going to work, you get Matt Prater on speed dial, compete with this Trujillo, and, I guess get through the season.
So Matt Prater is oldest among active kickers. I've got the list of guys and how long they went. He's 41. How many years can he do it?
Vinatieri went to 44?
46.
46.
Vinatieri went to 46.
That's
he played
crazy.
Until 2019. Morton Anderson went to 47, and the record is George Blanda, who went to 48.
Yep.
So,
well, look, Prater hit 250-yarders in the postseason coming off of that groin injury.
Yep.
Yeah.
Come on.
Don't write him off. I won't write him off.
don't let him kick off. Like preserve the leg as much
You're
as
right.
possible. But it's not. The guy made 92% of his field goals for the season last year, kicking for the Bills.
All right, then the question's obviously like this roster used to be thin at certain spots because they're making decisions at others. Are we going to talk about 2 kickers on the roster on the active roster?
Well, your punter
No,
your punter.
Your punter can handle your kickoff. That's what I think you do there.
All right, make sure you got one of those.
Quickly, while we're on like fringe, spots on the roster, do you have a thought on what they'll do at backup quarterback? Like, because Trubisky, I wonder if he'll have a market. Like, he won't have a crazy market, but there are starting quarterback jobs and so few names. Like, I wonder if he thinks he can find even if it's he's starting with a rookie behind him.
Yeah, I wonder that as well. If there's a little bit more of a market, because there's a huge need out there, and I think you'll see the Tuas, the Kyler Murrays, the Geno Smiths kind of shake free and fill some of that. I think Marcus Mariota is a guy that maybe head of the pecking order with Trubisky. But if there's some money out there for Trubisky and some team wants to do that, I think it's possible. But I think Trubisky is also a player that might be comfortable. Just, hey, I really like being Josh Allen's backup. I like this room. Our families are tight. Maybe he is kind of just satisfied with this role that he's in. But it's a decision the Bills have to make. He's not under contract. And, obviously if there's a decent little salary out there for Trubisky, he might take it. But, there's so many things that go into those decisions. And I do wonder about Trubisky and just his comfort in the role that he's in and maybe wanting to kind of ride it out.
Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills podcast. Today's episode he's got is about wide receiver trade ideas. So check that out. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
We'll talk next week. Next week, Combine Week.